ReefDudes is sponsored by Ecotech Marine and Bulk Reef Supply. So today is going to be the last update on the HelloReef Nano Reef, at least for a little while. What's going on, guys? Devin from ReefDudes. So today is going to be the final update on the HelloReef Nano Reef, at least as it lives on my desk, because it's being moved to a new home. Now this little beauty is actually moving to my office, so I spend a lot of my time there, and most work days I'm in the office, so I figured it would be kind of fun to have a reef tank at work. So this little guy is going to move from my home office to my work office. And it's kind of funny, so since I mentioned it probably about a month ago, I've had a couple different coworkers that ask me like every week, like, where's the tank, where's the tank? So it's kind of fun to see other people as excited about it as I am, and I think it's going to be an awesome little addition to my work office. I already picked up a HelloReef stand probably a couple weeks ago, and I got one of those 5-gallon ATO bins, so it's been slowly prepping and getting things ready to do the final move. Now thankfully it's a small tank, it's relatively easy to move. Not gonna lie, I've been dreading the draining and moving part, but I think I'm gonna drain it down and probably fill 3 or 4 5-gallon buckets. One for the rock, one for the creatures, another just for water, and hopefully that'll make the tank light enough that it'll be relatively easy to move. And overall, I think the tank's established enough now that it should be pretty easy to care for there. I was dealing with a bit of algae issues on the glass, but I did turn the lights down a little bit, and that seems to have done it. A Radion XR15 is extremely overkill for a 15-inch nano, but it's definitely nice to have if you have one. Now, the only issue I've really had with the tank lately is there's little bits of bubble algae popping up here and there. I did manually remove some, but I think that means that the next addition is going to be an emerald crab. I did add a little batch of rainbow clo polyps up at the top there. They were one chunk that's been living on my sand bed in the water box, so I decided to move them in just for a little bit of a higher splash of color up there. But now looking at it, I almost might put it on a little floating rock on the back wall, but we'll see. Clown, as always, living up a life, just loving the gonies. That little red one in front of the rainbow clo polyps was not happy at the moment. It was upside down on my sand bed, so I'm going to have to tack that one down with a couple dabs of super glue. Rock flowers, as they do, have moved around a bit. They used to be right up against the rock. Now they're a little bit all over the place, so I'll probably give them a slight rearrange when I reassemble the rock back in the tank after I move it this week. But otherwise, that, a couple little frags on the sand bed I'll probably reglue to the rock somewhere just to keep everything kind of like a cohesive structure. I did give everything a really good sand vacuuming this week and a good 5-gallon water change. Took the pump out after probably a year, and dipped it, gave it a good citric acid bath, and just cleaned it really well. So basically all the maintenance before she gets moved to make sure everything's in tip-top shape. I don't really have to worry about it when it's at the work office. All my random little creatures inside have been seen to be doing really well. I do love all these diverse little inverts in here. I feel like every time I stare at the tank, I almost like find the one that I forgot about and I see in there. So I love that prospect of the nano tank. And I bet you my office is going to become a lot busier place as people come in to stare at the tank. It'll lure people in. It'll be a cool conversations piece, and hopefully I can get a few more people into the hobby. And even as, customers or clients come in, I bet you they'll be gravitating into my office to check it out, which I think is going to be pretty cool. Because I love this hobby and I love sharing with people. Hence the YouTube channel, hence all the stuff I do with ReefDudes. So I think it'll be a really cool addition. So, before I move it, I decided it'd be fun to do one last update on it, as it still lives on my desk in my house right now. Now, the one big thing is having it here is it's super convenient to do, any maintenance or water change. I can just do one as I do my other tanks. I have devised a plan on how to handle that, though. I did pick up 2 of these 1-gallon mixing jugs, and I think what I'm going to do is just give it a 1-gallon per week water change. So out of 14, 15 gallons. Should be a decent monthly chunk. Basically what I do now is a 5-gallon bucket, which is probably 4 to 5 gallons, so it should be pretty close. So I can just easily bring one of these to work a week, have a second one. I scoop 1 gallon out, dump 1 gallon in. Quick and easy weekly water change, takes me less than a minute, and I can just dip it in my mixing bin and it'll be real easy. So I think that's going to be my plan going forward, to kind of keep up the water changes with it still being relatively easy in the office. Maybe every few months I'll bring a little bucket and do a water change with the sand bed and clean it, but that'll probably only be every few months. I do have some sand sifting conches and other stuff in there, so I think they'll do a relatively good job of keeping the sand bed up for me. Of course, he's hiding as I'm filming, but my blood fire shrimp, he's been out more and more lately, which was pretty cool. Yeah, so I'd say other than the bubble algae, this tank is rocking pretty good right now. It's really the only miniature complaint I have. I think I will manually remove a few more pieces before I move it over, then pop in an emerald crab when I see one at the LFS, and should take care of the rest for me. Gonny wise, you know, they're pretty darn happy. Some of these guys are encrusting like crazy, you know, despite the clown constantly going through all the tentacles and stuff. You know, they're usually out and pretty happy 99% of the time. And a little bit curious to see how it works having the Gonny beside the rainbow clove polyps, but so far so good. We'll see how that plays out. And you can barely see right now where that little sexy shrimp is behind the zoas in between the Gonny. There's actually a rock flower that moved out there too. Just a little edge of it. So, you know, rock flowers, they'll move where they want, they'll find where they're happy. Otherwise, you just kind of got to roll with it. Now, if any of you guys have a work tank, let me know if there's any pro tips on keeping the maintenance, anything special you do. Definitely share that in the comments below, as I'm sure it could potentially help me and others. So it's always good to share what works, you know, what you found successful. Did just refill my dosing container, so that should be good to go for a few more months. And everything else is more or less autopilot minus feeding the tank. And I even talked to another coworker to feeding them the days that I'm not in, so they should be pretty happy going forward. Alright guys, as always, if you enjoyed this, be sure to hit that like button. If you're new, make sure you subscribe. If you got any questions, let me know in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys on the next video.